Capture groups in regex. So at first, I will show you one example that perfectly shows the first use case of capture groups. You have two inputs. On the one line, you have cat, 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 and on the second line, you have cat with many letters T. Now, inside of the regex pattern, I write the word cat, and then let's also activate the global flag. And now you can see 4 matches and each match is equal to word cat. But then I want to add the sign plus, which is a quantifier from 1 until unlimited. But before I add it, please answer the question. Which of these two lines will be selected as one match? Will it be cat, 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 or will it be cat with many T letters? And now you can see that it is the second line, cat with many T letters. And this is because if you hover over the plus sign, you will see that this is a quantifier from 1 until unlimited, and you can see a slight white border around the letter T, which means that this quantifier is attached to the letter T. And currently our pattern says that we are looking for one C letter, so it uses the default quantifier 1. Then we are looking for one A letter, which also uses a default quantifier 1. And then we are looking for T letter from 1 until unlimited times. So this is the same pattern as we had before, but what if I want to attach the quantifier from 1 until unlimited, not to the letter T, but to an entire word cat? So, and eventually I want to select cat, cat, cat as one input. So for that, let's surround the word cat with parentheses. And now, if you hover over the plus sign, you can see the white border around the capture group cat. So, and it means that now this quantifier is attached to an entire word cat. And as you see in the match information tab, the first match contains 3 times word cat in a row. And also you can see that from the second line, we select only the word cat. So we don't select these additional T letters. Just by putting parentheses, we have changed the behavior of our regular pattern. And also what you can notice is that inside of the match information tab, we don't only have matches, we also have groups. And basically it works in this way that at first it shows the match. So we have the first match, cat, 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 and then it shows the group that this match is belonging to. So the first match belongs to the first group, and this is the reason why we see the group 1 after the match 1. And then the same with the second match. So the second match also belongs to the first group, and this is the reason why we see match 2 and then group 1. And here we have one interesting detail is that the first match contains 3 times word cat, but the first group contains only 1 time word cat. And this is the second powerful concept that we have in capture groups. Capture groups can create submatches inside of our match. So basically this is our first pattern. It creates our matches. But then inside of the capturing group, we have the second pattern. So this pattern is used just inside of this capture group in order to find submatch from our match. So as you see, the capturing group contains just the word cat, so it doesn't contain any additional quantifiers. And this is the reason why it selects just the word cat from the match cat, cat, cat. Now let's look to another example. So I have a text string, which is cat with some numbers. And at first, let's write the regex pattern that will select an entire line. So for that, I write the word cat, and then I create a new character class that contains a range of numbers, and then I attach the quantifier from 1 until unlimited to the character class. And now you can see that an entire line is selected. But then let's create 2 different capture groups. So the first capture group will select just the word cat, and the second capture group will select all numbers after the word cat. This is also important that the second capturing group have to surround the quantifier inside of the capturing group, because we don't want to select just one number, we want to select all numbers after the cat. And now if you look to the match information tab, you can see that we have one match, cat, with numbers, and then we have 2 different groups. So in the first group, we have just the word cat, and in the second group, we have only numbers. So this is a very handy way how we can separate our match into sub-matches that later we can easily use in our code. But then let's look to the match function with this regex pattern. So for that, I just copy this pattern. And now I go to the Visual Studio Code. So now on the right side, you can see the VS Code, and on the left side, you can see the console that will show the outcomes from the script.js file. So at first, let's create the variable match result. Now I use the match function with our regex pattern, and then I log to the console the match result. So at first, you can see that this is just an array that contains one match. And if I expand this array, you will also see that it contains a normal index and length properties. So this is just a normal array. But then let's hover over the match function, and now you can see that the return type of this function is regular expression match array or null. So what is a regular expression match array? So the first misleading detail about this function is that if we use a G flag inside of our pattern, this function returns a common array where we have only our matches. But if I want to see the capture groups, I need to remove the G flag. And now in the console, you can see a larger array. Let's expand it. And here you see more properties than a common array has. So for example, we have properties like input, index, and groups. So this is exactly the regex pattern match array. This is a normal array that contains additional properties. So at first, you can see 3 different matches and 3 different indexes. If you return back to regex101.com, you can also see 3 matches, but instead of indexes, you see the names of these matches. At first, we have the match 1, it will be with the index 0. Then we have the group 1, it will be with the index 1. And then we have the group 2, it will be with the index 2. So in the console, you can exactly see the first match with the index 0 and then 2 groups. So the first group is this one, it contains just the word cat. And the second group contains numbers, so this is the second group inside of our pattern. And then let's talk about additional metadata that this array has. So the easiest one is input. This is just the string from which we get these results. As you see, this is the same input string as we have here. It can be useful if instead of a literal string as we have inside of our code, we use some kind of variable and then we want to verify what this variable is equal to. So the second property is index. So this shows from which letter inside of our input our regex pattern found a match. So here it shows 0. It means that starting from the first letter of our input, we got our match. So for example, if I add the word wrong with space before cat, in this case you can see that our index is equal to 6, and this is because the first 6 letters of our input don't match with our regex pattern, and only starting from the 7th letter we have our match. But because indexes are 0 based, we have the number 6 inside of the index property. And the first property that we have is groups. Currently it is equal to undefined. So currently, even though that we have our groups, they only have indexes, but we also can name our groups, and in this case we will see them inside of the groups property. At first I removed the wrong word from the string, and then let's call our group. For example, I will call the first group animals, and the second group I will call numbers. And now, if you save this pattern, you can see that groups is equal to a JavaScript object, and if we expand it, you will see that the key of the first element is equal to animals and the value is equal to cat. So this is exactly what we have inside of the first group. The name of this group is animals and the value is cat. And then the second group has the name numbers and the value 494949. And this we get from the second group. So now you know the basic theory about capturing groups. So let's practice them by solving this code challenge. In this code challenge, you will need to implement the function extract item damage that has one input item stats. So this function should extract item name and damage value. Item stats property is a string like sword plus 15. And then this function should return a JavaScript object with item and damage. And this is the first example input, so it contains sword plus 15. And in this case, your function should return an object with 2 key value pairs. So item, which is equal to sword, and damage, which is equal to 15. The second example is very similar. So we have bow plus 8. And now you can see that we just changed the values inside of this object, but we still have 2 key value pairs. And then in the third input, we have wrong text. So our regex pattern should validate that this input is invalid, and then our function should return null. Actually, you can solve this function in 2 different ways. So in the first way, you can use normal capturing groups. So like we used here, we just used capturing groups without names. And and in this case we need to access the value by using the indexes. So at first try solving this challenge by using normal capturing groups, and then try solving this challenge in the second way when you use naming for your capturing groups. So instead of accessing your values by using indexes, you write names for your groups. I hope that you will solve it yourself, but if you have any problems or if you want to compare your solution with mine, in this case let's solve it together. At first, I add the example inputs to the text string area, and then let's select our flags. So while we are on this website, I will use the global flag just because I want to see all matches inside of the match information tab. But before copying this pattern into our function, you need to remove this flag. And then I will also use the case insensitive flag because lowercase letters and uppercase letters are both valid. So then let's think about structure that we will have. I think that our match should select an entire line if this is valid, and then we should write two groups. So the first group will select just an item from our match, so for example sword, and the second group will select the damage, so for example 15. And then we will work just with values from our groups. So at first, let's write our match. I start from the characters class that contains a range of numbers. And because we use the case insensitive flag, all English letters are valid. And after that, I use the quantifier from 1 until unlimited because I don't want to select each letter individually. I want to select an entire word. Then we can see that we have a space. Let's just add it into our pattern. And then we have a plus that indicates our damage. But if I just write plus, you will see that it will not be selected because this is a special symbol. If you hover over it, you will see that this is a quantifier. If we want to select the literal value of the symbol, we need to escape it. So just add the backslash before the plus sign. And now if you hover over it, you will see that we matches the character plus. So this is no longer a quantifier. And then let's also add a character class for our numbers. And now you can see that this pattern works correctly because it matches with only valid lines. You can also simplify this pattern. So for example, instead of the character classes, you can use shorthands like \d for numbers and \w for words. But in this case, this is very important to select the pattern that will be easier to read. If this is easy for you to read this pattern, you can use this one, but just for clarity, I will use character classes. So now all what we need to do is just to define our capturing groups. So the first group will be around the first character class, and it will also include the quantifier. So and now in the match information tab, you can see that inside of the first group we have sword and bow, so it works correctly. And then just add the second group for numbers. And now you can see that we have the match sword space plus 15. So in the first group we have sword, and in the second group we have 15. And the same for bow, so this pattern works correctly. Also, before copying this pattern, make sure to remove the global flag. And now if you had any problems, you can copy this pattern and try solving the challenge until the end yourself. But then let's continue together. So now on the left side, you can see my console with 3 times word undefined from 3 different console logs. So it means that I'm connected to the browser and I can start solving this challenge. At first, let's add our pattern. So then let's use the match function and let's store it inside of the match result. So at this time, let's return the match result to see what it is equal to. So now you can see that we have 2 arrays and 1 null from 3 console logs. So let's expand the first array. So here we have our match, and then we have 2 groups. The group with index 1 will be an item, and the group with index 2 will be the damage. So now instead of returning our pattern, let's create the object result. Now I wrote the object result. So you can see that we have 2 key value pairs. Item that gets the value from the match result by accessing it with index 1, and then damage. It also gets the value from the match result, just it uses the index 2. Then in the console you can see that first 2 lines with the results that we expect, but the third line throws an error. If you read it, you can see that cannot read properties of null, reading 1. So basically what happens is, if match result is equal to null, and if we try to access the null by index 1, run, you will get this kind of error because null can't be accessed by index. It just doesn't have any values inside of the index. So, and it means that before accessing the values by using array indexes, we need to make sure that the match result is not equal to null. So let's handle this case first. And now you can see that all results inside of the console match with the results that we expected, which means that this function works correctly. But as I said, this is just the first way how you can solve this challenge. Now let's solve this challenge by using the naming for groups. So at first, let's call our groups inside of the pattern. So now we have names for our groups, and it means that we don't need to create the JavaScript object manually. So let's remove those lines. And let's just return the match result to see what is equal to. Now in the console, if you expand the first array, you will see that it contains the property groups. So let's expand them. It contains two properties, damage and item. This is exactly the result that we expect, and it means that instead of creating the JavaScript object manually, we can just return the match result.groups. And now you can again see that we have the right answers in the console, which means that our function works correctly. In this video, you learned about capturing groups. In the next episode, we'll learn about match all function.